It's not your lucky day. I'm in a rotten mood.
Fans of both the Crash and Spyro franchises are utterly clueless, and that's actually doing more harm to both brands than the silence from Activision Blizzard. So let's explore the issues a bit deeper and explain why fans of these games need to calm down and use their brains. So what is the issue I'm referring to? It seems like ever since the fall of last year, fans of Crash and Spyro collectively decided to become nihilistic in their outlooks, despite statements made by Activision in the past where they mentioned both franchises are tentpoles for them going forward. Admittedly, these statements were made before they were acquired by Microsoft to make games under the Xbox umbrella. However, if you look at the fact Xbox have been using both properties as part of their marketing, it's clear they actually want the average consumer to have these games in their minds going forward. People who have this frankly skull-fucked take have stated the game sold poorly, and this is why we haven't had the announcement of any new titles. So let's actually break that down, as it's seriously flawed. Let's go back to 2017 for just a moment. That's when the Crash Insane trilogy launched for the PlayStation 4. 1 year later, it would launch on basically everything else. To date, that one title has moved 20 million copies. That's a huge number by any metric. The next release in the Crash franchise, the remake of Crash Team Racing, has sold a staggering 10 million units globally as of 3 weeks ago. Again, these are big numbers. Crash 4 managed to move 5 million copies as well, which by anyone setting realistic expectations is an incredible amount of sales. We also know the Spyro Reignited trilogy sold 10 million copies, so again, it did remarkably well. The only title we don't have concrete sales for would be Crash Team Rumble, which Toys for Bob created after work wrapped up on Crash 4 It's About Time. But the numbers don't lie. Both franchises have put up robust sales since returning, so why are fans of these platformers so doom-pilled? I would say part of why the fan bases have been so doom and gloom comes down to the fact neither Microsoft nor Activision have said anything about brand new releases, which, I have to say, is not really a problem when you get down to it. It's not much of a problem if you have even a modicum of knowledge when it comes to game design and development. On average, it takes a developer 3 to 5 years to make a game. That's if the development goes incredibly well, with very few hiccups. However, when you start to look at more recent games and their developments, you have to consider a couple of things. The pandemic really did a number on studios as they had to transition from a traditional working environment to a more work-at-home focused one. For indie projects, this was never much of an issue, since a lot of developers worked on these games from home anyway. But for bigger budgeted games from a more corporate environment, that really disrupted things. Which, even if they aren't the biggest titles in the world, games like Crash and Spyro are really going to be impacted by this. Just look at the troubled development Crash Team Rumble faced. Originally known as Wumpa League, Crash Team Rumble was in development for much longer than was traditional. Part of that comes down to the pandemic causing it to be stop-start. Another aspect was Toys for Bob being shunted onto Call of Duty projects as a support studio, and parts of it was the game not functioning as intended. So this would mean future Crash projects would be put on the back burner a little bit. But okay, what of Spyro? Considering we're now a total of 7 years out from when that launched. Again, using a little deductive reasoning, we can see why we haven't heard anything. Vicarious Visions, the other studio that was working on platformers for Activision Blizzard, was rebranded as Blizzard Albany in 2021. It seems like the plan was to previously have Toys for Bob and Vicarious Visions alternate working on Crash and Spyro each year, which is something both companies had previously been doing with the Skylanders series. However, after Vicarious Visions finished working on remakes for the first 2 Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games, things changed. So, the delays Crash Team Rumble faced, along with Vicarious Visions no longer being around to work on either future Spyro or Crash projects, it's not surprising that both titles would be on the back foot. This, coupled with Toys for Bob getting shut down, then later reopening as an independent studio, and you can see why we haven't heard anything concrete for a while now. There have been rumors, of course, and nothing has come from them yet. But where there's smoke, there's fire. Also, I think there's a good chance a certain little robot from PlayStation may just indicate platformers are coming back. Before I get into why Astrobot is probably a signal why we're going to see more platformers from bigger companies, why not consider hitting the subscribe button if you like deep dive video essays into the happenings of the gaming industry. So why am I saying Astrobot is going to impact the futures of not just Crash and Spyro, but other mascot platformers going forward? It's because the game has been doing absolute numbers for the PlayStation 5 and was something of a surprise hit, despite people loving Astro's Playroom, which just so happens to be packed into every PS5 console. As of 8 months ago, Astro has managed to move 1.5 million copies, with some sources from March of this year claiming it has crossed 2.3 million units, which by any metric is a pretty good number. You have to keep in mind, platformers tend to do numbers over time, and rarely, if ever, have explosive sales figures right out of the gate. This is mostly thanks to the games having times where they will move units thanks to things like holidays or massive discounts. During those periods, parents are going to want kid-friendly games, and with the current gaming market, there are fewer and fewer games aimed at that demographic. It's mostly thanks to the average gamer now being an adult. Whereas in the 1990s and through the early 2000s, the average gamer skewed younger, because gaming was seen as a kids-only hobby. At this point in time, almost everyone games to some extent, meaning the hobby is now well and truly entrenched into the mainstream, with gaming now making more money than both the film and music industries combined. But as a whole, Astrobot is doing super well, and beyond the established names in the platforming genre like Mario, Crash, Spyro, and Sonic, it's the first time we've really seen a new platformer on the scene actually doing super well. I've excluded Ratchet & Clank from this list because it's a hybrid of a platformer and shooter. Plus, it established itself back on the PS2 and has outlived its siblings that launched around the same time. But Astrobot is a message to game developers that you don't need to make a cinematic blockbuster game that takes the better part of a decade to come out. You can literally make a game that only takes a couple of years and a couple of million or less to make, and it'll end up generating profit anyways. At this point in time, the statement made by Ted Price, formerly of Insomniac Games, is ringing true. The AAA game, as we know it, is dead. It's time for developers to look back and make games with a similar design ethos to those of the past. Astrobot is the first of many such games that are taking this approach. We're also seeing indies like Clair Obscur Expedition 33 taking off and finding an audience because they're designed around delivering experiences the big boys have long since forgotten, making games that are actually fun to play and aren't just these huge cinematic titles that fail to deliver on being good games or even good movies. So this brings me to the next segment. When can we expect something new from either Spyro the Dragon or Crash Bandicoot? I would say we've got a while to wait. Toys for Bob haven't long been independent, and whatever work they had on either Crash 5 or Spyro 4 would have been halted as part of being shuttered and later reopened. However, given the rumors we've previously had, Spyro 4 seems the more likely of the two, at least to me. There was that supposedly cancelled Crash 5 project where Crash and Spyro would have met. From what I've managed to uncover in my own investigation, that project never left the proof of concept phase, and frankly, I'm glad it stopped there. If this had been the 90s or 2000s when Crash and Spyro were the new kids on the block but with rapid fanbases, yeah, that would have been awesome to see. But in the modern gaming landscape, a team-up like that really wouldn't do well. Games, as a whole, have evolved, and we need something more substantial than a mere crossover. I'm not saying a crossover would be a bad thing, but that's something that Toys for Bob or whoever else ends up developing for either series would need to build towards. You'd also have to design the levels in interesting ways, but as a whole, I think we see Spyro first, and probably the earliest we're going to see anything for it is going to be sometime in either late 2027 or in early 2028, with Crash maybe popping up sometime in late 2028 or early 2029, with both games releasing sometime between 2027 and 2031. So do you think either of these legendary mascot platformers are dead? Let me know in the comments. If you've made it this far into the video, then check out the video on screen now. And until next time, keep blazing that trail.